As you add more babies to your family, you might wonder what sort of impact it would have on your homeschool. How will you have time to stop and nurse the baby every few hours? In this episode, Carol and I are back to finish our conversation about breastfeeding with Jill Seberger, who is a lactation consultant and mom of 7. If you missed the first part of our conversation, be sure to go back and listen to episode 258. You're listening to the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. This is a podcast to help you homeschool simply, inexpensively, and enjoyably. Carol Joy Seid has been helping families homeschool for several decades now through her seminars and consulting services. And I'm Rachel Winchester, a fellow homeschool mom using this method with my own 3 kids. Today, we talk about breastfeeding toddlers, finding helpful resources, and changing our perspective about nursing a hungry baby while caring for older kids. Listen in.
So if I were pregnant, what would you tell me?
I would tell you to hold your baby skin to skin as much as you can.
Why? What does that do for a baby?
It helps their brain development. It helps them stabilize their vital signs. So imagine, all they know so far is being inside you. And now they're born into this, much louder and brighter world, even if you try to keep things calm in the room, which would be great. And so being on skin to skin with mom allows them to hear your heartbeat and your breathing sounds and your voice and your stomach sounds and all the things they're used to. So it helps them regulate their respiratory rate, their breathing rate. It helps them keep their blood sugar stable. So especially if they're at risk for having high or low or not being able to handle their blood sugars because they were born early or because they're born late or because mom struggled with her blood sugars throughout pregnancy. It helps them regulate their blood sugars because they're not stressed out. So adults, when they get admitted to the hospital, they get all stressed out and their blood sugars go up. And sometimes if they didn't need insulin before, sometimes they have to have it while they're in that stressful situation. But babies are different. When they get stressed out, their blood sugars drop. And so keeping your baby skin to skin as much as you can helps their blood sugars to stay stable. And it also, it helps them to latch better, which is obviously super helpful in those first few days when they're trying to learn, kind of keeps those instincts going. It helps mom make more milk. Holding your baby skin to skin for 30 minutes stimulates the hormones for mom to make more milk. And it helps them to cry less, which this is a fun one because it helps them to cry less, right then in the moment. But also an Australian study found that babies who spent more time skin to skin their first 8 weeks of life cried less when they were 1. So that's pretty cool to see, it's affecting them for later, which is another fun thing about how breastfeeding shows us how our bodies are so beautifully designed by God, because when you get to breastfeeding the toddler, which is a pretty funny experience because it's quite silly and different, you don't know what to expect. It's so amazing that they can go explore and fall and whatever for themselves and then come back to this safe place that is their mom and the breast, and they can, receive food and comfort, and so that they can go explore again and probably fall again.
Yes. Speaking of breastfeeding toddlers, I was going to ask, how long do you think you should breastfeed? And kind of that dynamic of as they get older, it's not because you're not breastfeeding them because you're the only thing they can have. They can only drink milk. They can eat other things. They can drink other things at that point. But then they're coming back to you for a different reason. And, really it's the same reason that we're just talking about, of that attachment, that bond, that to feel that reassurance and that love that, okay, everything's okay. The world is as it's supposed to be, even though this happened to me. Maybe you could talk about how it really is the whole time, that regulation tool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So it's nice. I mean, it's nice when you can breastfeed for a year because then you can avoid giving them formula. Then they can have those other foods that, hopefully are kind of basic whole type foods. And then the World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding at 2 years or more if mom and baby mutually desire. And so
yes. Two.
And then after that, I mean, the average age of weaning worldwide is more around the age of
Yeah.
4. And so, and the health benefits do keep piling on
Mm.
throughout those years. And so it is affecting their long-term health, even when it's definitely not the norm
Mhm.
around us. And then you have all of the my brain development
Mhm.
and personality development benefits too.
Mm.
So, and it is like a lot of people think it looks like nursing a 5-month-old, but of course it doesn't. Like it's way different and more, can be much more sporadic than that, and they're all quite different from each other. But
Mhm.
it's just a fun, bring some laughs and
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly when they ask
enjoy the
to
ride,
nurse
kind of.
yeah, when they ask to nurse in public and they're practically driving. That could be a little awkward. But
Well, and it's like sleeping advice can be so hard too because moms are so tired, and so that idea that like they're not going to always want to sleep on you. Like at some point they will sleep in their own bed. And so same thing with breastfeeding, moms start to get really nervous. They're never going to stop. Like they are.
Yeah.
They are going to stop.
they definitely
Yeah.
will stop by college is my motto. That's all that really matters.
I don't know if that's comforting.
But you think about the Bible, which is our roadmap, and you think about Samuel, that he couldn't go to the temple until he was weaned. And so, to a Western mind, it's like, oh, was he like 6 months old when they brought him? Or was he, and he was probably 4 or 5 years old when they brought him to the temple. You're not going to bring a little infant and drop him off to an elderly man and say, see ya. But just, in our
Mhm.
culture, we just have such different expectations of the nursing relationship. Sheila Kipley's book, are you familiar? I'm sure you are with that, Jill. Breastfeeding and Natural Child Spacing.
I don't know. Maybe the cover would look familiar, but
Yeah.
her name.
So she and her husband founded the Couple to Couple League, and they, talk.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and they talk about how God created breastfeeding to space children, and that we're not designed to have a baby every 9 months, and so it's all part of the design. And when we start to get our hands in the pot, it goes downhill. But if we can really, you know think about how God created the human body and this whole rhythm and this system that he created, it's just like learning a beautiful dance, and it's for our benefit and our protection and our well-being as well as our children. We're not just baby machines, but that God created our bodies to do this, and that there's a rhythm and there's a pattern to use.
Mhm.
Yep. And just having that confidence, it's so hard. All new moms have a lot of doubts about different things. And so I love when the people around them can help build up their confidence because eventually they'll have to get to a point where they've asked all the questions and now they just have to trust the process and trust that their body was made to do this. And so they can go, with the wave and flows and they can have doubts like, do I have enough milk today? Because you seem to want to go back to the breast again and I feel pretty empty. But then they can say, okay, I know that the process works. I know my body was made to do this. So I'm just going to keep nursing you through this, whatever it is. And then, in a couple days, they go back to what they were used to, and who knows what was going on with that baby. Maybe they were sick or they just needed a little extra comfort or they're going through a growth spurt. It could be any number of things that cause that mom to think, "Do I have enough milk today?" And she kind of has two choices. She can either give the baby a bottle of formula, which won't tell her body to make more milk, and maybe start this kind of downhill decline of more formula and less breast milk, or she can trust the process and nurse the baby again and just keep going like that.
Yeah. I was wondering if you could share, when we were emailing back and forth, you were sharing some statistics about, you live in Nebraska, so you were sharing some Nebraska specific statistics. So I was wondering if you could share those with our listeners because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. So in Nebraska in 2023, 90% of mothers initiated breastfeeding or wanted to initiate breastfeeding. By the time they discharged from the hospital 2 or 3 days later, only 62% were still exclusively breastfeeding. All the other babies had gotten formula. So almost 30% of these newborns had gotten formula. And, we have all kinds of guidelines, like a newborn should only get formula if it's medically indicated, because we know all these benefits to breastfeeding and establishing breastfeeding, but that's not what's happening. And so then that just makes me really sad for these moms that they didn't have the right people around them to help them reach that goal, even in the first few days, which is theoretically when they should have had all that support around them.
Are you wondering what to do for the preschool years? While we don't believe you should use in utero flashcards or teach a 4-year-old to read, the first 7 years of a child's life are crucial for their physical, spiritual, and intellectual growth. Our early education bundle will teach you the essential groundwork every parent needs to lay in the early years. This bundle includes Carol's parenting seminar, Let the Little Children Come, plus 2 interview-style conversations with Carol and JJ. They discuss what to do for preschool and the important role of nature and play in our children's lives. After listening to the early education bundle, you'll know the simplicity of what your child needs most in these early years. This resource will give you practical instruction for raising children with eternity in mind. Use coupon code PODCAST at checkout to receive 15% off your order. Visit our online store, homeschoolmadesimple.net/store, to get the early education bundle today.
Yeah, and they send the children home with formula from the hospital. Again, is a whole nother issue because you weaken, you start to doubt. You have people around you that maybe undermine you. And then there it is waiting to rescue you from this scary thing that you're trying to embark on. Instead of having people cheering for you and, hanging in there for you. My sweet mom, who died at 100, she told me that she desperately wanted, she was so ahead of her time. She really was a health nut as well. She said that she was told that her milk didn't agree with me by the nurses in the hospital, and she gave up breastfeeding. And so I had a lifelong allergy to dairy products and things, which of course is what formula was made from and still primarily is. And all because she wanted to do what was best for me, but she didn't have anyone helping her make that happen. And that just why I'm so excited for your resources, Jill. What books do you recommend for pregnant mamas to be reading or breastfeeding moms to be reading?
I do really love the Lactation League's The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding.
Me too.
Because it comes from a viewpoint of like, your body's made to do this, and let us show you, 50 different ways, and how all these different little chemical changes that are going to happen in your body throughout pregnancy and labor, so that you can begin to have that internal trust, which is really helpful. And then Dr. Jen's Guide to Breastfeeding is just like, it's a much shorter book. And she's funny, and so that's a nice
Great
read too. I like that one also.
Rachel, when you were having your littles, and you may still have more littles, but when you had your first 3 children, if you had lived next door to Jill, what were some of the things you would have asked her or knocked on her door for help with?
Yeah, I would have. How do you do it? How do you nurse and have all these other littles running around and, keep that going when there's so many other things to do, or not feel that pressure of, okay, I've got to feed the baby again, and it not become this kind of thing that you feel a drag about, but something that you really have joy, like you were talking about, that it feels breezy, that it feels enjoyable to you, that, wow, I get to do this while this baby is this age and in this stage.
Yeah, I actually have 3 different answers to that. So one of them is
Okay.
Having books next to you when you sit down to nurse, so that when the toddler comes over, you can just be like, hey, let's, you can just start reading one of the books, or have them pick out one of the books. And they almost don't even realize that you're doing something else, because they're like, oh, mom has time to sit and read me a book. And yet you got to nurse and also read with the toddler too. So I love that one.
Love it.
I had posted a video about how I was thankful to my baby who wanted to nurse again because it allowed me a minute to sit down.
Yes.
Because as moms, like, we can be moving all day long in all these different tasks, just like running around the house. And so instead of having this, I have to stop what I'm doing to sit down and nurse this baby, transitioning that into like, oh, this is a beautiful gift that I was given because I get to sit down and nurse this baby and enjoy them or talk to them and pray and have like, think about getting some peace back that maybe I had kind of lost as I was shuffling around. And so transitioning that mindset. And also just you get a lot more efficient. And so I think about, you guys probably remember feeling like I need more hands as you're trying to like hold your breath and this baby and get them latched and they're so like squirmy and they just flop all over. You're like, no, I need at least 2 more hands to do this. And you going from that, which you don't know is going to change, right? When you're in it, you're like, surely this is never going to get easier, but it does. It gets easier. It gets to the point where now you're cooking dinner and nursing the baby at the same time. Like you have to do so many things.
Right.
And so just like casting a vision, which is, well, hopefully we'll get there where, we have all these moms and sisters who nursed. And so the community around you is kind of, they're saying that like, I know it's hard, but it's going to get better, which is something that we just didn't have over the last 40 years after our breastfeeding rates had plummeted so much. So when we actually had our first baby, we went to Colorado with my husband's family when he was 5 days old. And so maybe we're a little insane. Maybe we just didn't know if they wanted to plan a family vacation. Most of them are healthcare providers. And so they have limited vacation days off. And so this is when it works. And of course, we didn't know when baby was going to arrive. So we're like, well, we'll come if we can come and we won't if we can. And he ended up coming a little late. And so when he was 5 days old, we got in the car and we drove 8 hours to Colorado, like slapping each other on the legs, like to stay awake. Because of course, we're new sleep deprived parents. But it was really, really beautiful once we were there because I was in a house with all these sisters-in-law who had all nursed in the last few years. And I wish that they had, been like, oh, try this to latch him deeper. Because of course I was having like tons of pain and I didn't know what I was doing. I knew the lactation consultants at our hospital. I had worked with them. I still did not pick up the phone to call them. So that's another like big piece of my advice to new moms. Like, do not be afraid to pick up the phone and call a lactation consultant. Like, they want to help you. You don't have to wait until it's a big problem. Like, the small problems are great. The ones where you can just reassure them, like, no, actually, here's how I know like everything's fine, or here's these small tweaks you could try to get on a better track. Like, don't feel like it has to be this big problem before you call them. So I wish they, could have helped me tweak some of those things. But what they could and all did do was say, I know it's hard. It's going to get better. And that was huge.
Wow. Because they had confidence and they had faith. We could talk to you all day, right, Rachel? Couldn't we?
Indeed.
I wish Jill did live next door to us.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. I had somebody before I had my first baby who kind of gave me a warning of when I was pregnant. And she just said, it might be a little difficult, but keep at it. Just keep going. And just to have that, even just one person to tell me that. And I had done a lot of learning beforehand. And so I was very prepared, but you still don't know what it's going to be like. And you've never done it before. So it's brand new. And just to have that voice in my head of, it's okay. Just keep at it and get the support you need. Keep going, even if it's hard. It's gonna work out. Most likely, it's gonna work out, and it did for me in all 3 situations. But let our listeners know where they can find you online, and I definitely recommend everybody download her ebook and flip through that. It's very helpful. Where can they find you, Jill?
And did you mention that it's free? I just got mine delivered to my inbox right before we went on the air. I'm like, okay, I want this. Yes.
Yes, the ebook is free. Yes. Yeah, Rachel, I love, so everyone is some people don't have any problems and, nothing difficult comes up in their breastfeeding journey. But a lot of people have some sort of small hurdle and they're all different. And so you can't necessarily prepare for all these different things that aren't going to happen to you, right? But
Right.
you can get over them. And I think that's sometimes the piece that they need to know, because they can't see the other side. And so they just need someone to tell them, like, no, you can almost all of the hurdles you can get over and get on to reaching your breastfeeding goals. So that's a helpful thing. So yeah, the best place to find me is at breezybreastfeeding.com. And you can grab the free ebook there. You can sign up for my class there, or you can sign up for that at courses.breezybreastfeeding.com. You can read all kinds of information on breezybreastfeeding.com. And then I'm on like all of the social media things too. Yeah.
And as I was looking it over today, before we went on, I just like resources that you give, like, what about pacifiers? What about like things like that? And it's just like, it's just one-stop shopping. I don't mean that you're selling the stuff. It's just, it's free information, but it's just so marvelous to have a resource like this in real time, a real mother who's in the trenches nursing a baby and has 7 children. Like, I think you've got a platform that is undisputed and solid, and what a resource you are to my families that I work with, and it just gives me such joy to introduce you to my tribe. So thank you, Jill, for being
Yeah.
with
Well,
us.
thank you for doing what you do and encouraging parents in their homeschooling. You can kind of see how, like, gaining this confidence as you're breastfeeding your baby then just transitions to this confidence as you realize, like, you're their primary former and educator.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's so in answer to Rachel's, the thing that one of her friends said, what are you doing a podcast on this for if it's a homeschool podcast? But
Yeah.
it's all part of it. Homeschool starts at
Mhm.
conception and ends at death. And it's how we parent from the moment of conception. And so it's just part of the journey. And I feel like you're putting guardrails along this like bridge that we're walking across to keep us on the bridge from falling off into the water. And you're just equipping our confidence as parents. So then we're like, well, I could do that. Maybe I can teach them their ABCs. And now maybe I can teach them how to write and to read Shakespeare. And, it just builds, and it's all that what God calls us to do, He equips us to do. And this is part of it. And having you as a tool in our toolbox is amazing. So we're so honored to partner with you,
Well,
Jill.
thanks, Carol. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. Visit her website at breezybreastfeeding.com. Jill has also generously offered our listeners a special discount for her breastfeeding course. When you use coupon code HMS, you'll receive 30% off the class. Look in the show notes for all of those links. Remember, Jesus' commandments are not burdensome. What He calls you to do, He will enable you to do. Blessings.